Redditors with personality disorders, narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, etc. What are some of your success stories regarding relationships after being diagnosed? I was recently diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder. I'm 28. I grew up with the message that intimacy equaled surrendering all control to the other person, and I was never able to fully trust my parents or family members because I knew they were more concerned about themselves than me. As an adult, I've always tended to lose myself in relationships, lose sight of my own wants and needs, and form myself around the wants and needs of my friends and partners, whilst feeling resentful for being unable to show the real me to anyone. Currently, I have no real friends because I find that exhausting. And I have a boyfriend, but I hate the way I absorb his values and opinions, and I miss being in touch with my true self like when I'm single. I desperately want to have meaningful relationships in my life, but I can't escape the impulse to become subservient to whomever I allow close to me, and I end up resenting them as their identities take hold of me. I don't want to be alone, but alone is the only way I feel in control of myself. I can't say I'm a success story, because I only recently received this diagnosis, and I still have a lot to work on, but at least I know what I'm dealing with now. And for me, success will consist of learning how to actually share my true thoughts, feelings, opinions with people, which is really freaking hard, how to end a relationship that doesn't suit me rather than suiting myself to my relationships, and learning to trust myself even when others disagree with me. I think I have a long road ahead. And OP, for that long road ahead, I wish you the best of luck. These sorts of things can only really be worked on once you're aware of them. And now that you are, you're on the right path. Story 2. I was suffering for years with unknown mental health issues and had a string of awful abusive relationships. I finally got diagnosed with BPD, started getting help and met an amazing person who supports me and puts up with my sometimes over-the-top mood swings with kindness and love. Sometimes I worry I'm putting too much on him and tell him this often. He always bats it away, saying I'm worth it. To be clear, I don't abuse him or say horrible things to him. It's just my mood around him that can be toxic. If I get upset, I can't really stop the process and it can be very stressful, with me crying and unable to self-soothe, etc. I do my best to keep these things to a minimum, and I'm getting better the more time goes by. And even just blurting out how I feel and getting a hug from him helps so much, knowing I'm not being judged. Even if I'm acting like a child, I still have a long road ahead, and maybe one day he'll realize it's too much for him, which I would totally understand. It's shown me what a person can be and what everyone deserves. Love and understanding, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. I'm not unlovable just because I'm sick. Story 3. I've been with my boyfriend for 5+ years, and was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder about 2.5 years into our relationship. Before my diagnosis, even though we got along amazingly, communicated well, and were generally happy, I would find myself throwing toddler-like tantrums at any perceived or imagined slight. I hated this about myself. I thought I was a bad person because I just couldn't control myself. My partner happens to be an amazing people reader. He seems to just naturally pick up on people's personalities and intentions as easily as I notice hair color. He was nothing but understanding. Even though we had little knowledge of mental health, we both knew something was off, and he was a constant support as I sought out treatment. I was diagnosed with BPD, and given a therapist who specialized in PTSD in veterans. It turns out my flare-ups were somehow similar to a PTSD flashback. I was taught a bunch of techniques to use when I felt myself starting to flare out. It was also the first time I realized that my parents had been incredibly emotionally negligent, to the point where I actually hadn't learned to deal with emotions. What was accidentally taught instead was that if I'm angry or sad, I'm about to be yelled at. It's taken 3 years, but I found the right combo of meds. I'm not cured, and I'm definitely not perfect, but I don't have flare-outs anymore. Sure, I sometimes raise my voice when I shouldn't or get into stupid arguments with my boyfriend, but I'm working on myself every day, and we're super solid and super in love. I'm actually typing this beside him aboard a ferry on our way to what will hopefully be our new life. In 3 hours, I'll be doing the entrance exam for a college program that I'm really excited about. And afterwards, we're checking out the shop he'll be managing in September. We have a dog and a cat together, we illustrated a book together, found a 20,000-year-old fossil together, and foraged together at least once a week. I just want to say, I know we're a few stories in already, but it's so nice having a positive thread for a change. It's been a lot of negativity recently, or at the very least serious topics. And this is still somewhat serious, but success stories are just nice to hear, man. Congrats to this OP, it really does sound like they're in love. And that's awesome. Story 4. Borderline personality disorder here, also known as "she's a psycho, stay away from her" in common media. I started my current relationship before I'd been diagnosed. I had cheated on my previous 2 boyfriends and gotten together with the guy I cheated with. He got me to realize that my brain wasn't doing normal things. Turns out sabotaging your own life and having panic attacks at the thought of people canceling plans isn't a normal person thing to do. So I went to the doctor and got diagnosed with BPD. I'd already gotten a diagnosis of depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and social anxiety disorder in the past, and was struggling with them at the same time. Getting diagnosed made everything easier. Suddenly, I knew why I panicked every time people canceled plans, why my emotions seemed to never matched the situation and why they were so strong. Why I decided to sabotage every relationship I had by cheating. And knowing the reason behind the actions meant that I could get better, and work to control my brain instead of it controlling me. He helped me work on my issues and stuck by me. Helped me move out of my parents' place, which meant getting away from the abuse that had caused all of my mental health problems in the first place. And it turns out that getting away from the source of the issues really helps with recovery. Who knew? We are still together 5.5 years later, and we're looking to buy a house soon. We own cats and have talked about and ultimately decided to wait another 5-ish years, starting a human family. Story 5. No antisocial disorder, but a very antisocial person. I'm a diagnosed autist with chronic depression due to childhood abuse. Where to start? I have this intense need to be alone, yet I hate to be lonely. I want to have friends, yet I hate any form of socializing. I feel like an empty shell. I combine different pieces of behavior and information to form some sense of me. I feel like a different person depending on who I'm interacting with, like some B-movie actor. So I hide everything that might make me different. Sometimes I fail, the mask cracks. When that happens, I avoid or ghost those people. I have no social instinct. Everything needs to be done consciously. I understand that's my burden. The worst part is the loneliness. No matter how loving and understanding my friends, family, and partner are, there's a lingering loneliness I can never shake off. I know they love me and I try to too, but the majority of the time it just doesn't seem to reach me. No sense of guilt to be found either. It's so hard to explain. I see it as most people's emotions, dreams, souls, whatever makes them them, are floating in huge strings of soap balls on the wind of life. You know, those kind kids blow. When meeting others, the balls bounce against each other, and when they become friends, the soap balls stick. And sometimes when we truly love each other, our soap balls merge together into a bigger one. Now, I'm not in a ball of soap. I'm in a hard plastic ball, but I can see and understand them. I can see their dreams, their beings. They're sticking to me, yet they'll never merge with me. Is that still true understanding, though? Something somewhere is disconnected, yet I can see the green grass on the other side, never to be reached. Despite the screwed up mess I am, I found an equally messed up person. She suffered from beatings and mental abuse herself. We have great comfort and understanding in each other through trauma. She's my people shield, since just existing on this earth for 5 hours drains all my energy to live there. I know it's very hard on her. One day I'm king of the world, the next a paranoid maniac. But being with her, I finally understand what happiness can be. I just wish I had some turn-off button I could flick when I feel an episode coming up. Story 6. I have PTSD. Open and honest communication is the key to successful relationships. You see it thrown around so often because it's so true. Seeing a therapist has been the biggest success, though. I found out I have terrible codependency. I used to get upset, anxious, and or jump through hoops trying to cheer my SO up when I noticed he was down, to the point of getting upset if he didn't respond well to my efforts. For anyone relating to this is codependency. Mine was caused by my parents constantly making me responsible for their moods. Your mood should rely only on you. Expecting the moods of others to be a certain way so you can feel good is a toxic trait. The advice that worked for me is to remember to give each other space when this happens. Now when I see my significant other is down, I give him space. I cook our dinner, clean up, and then go do my thing, whether that's gardening, watching something, or reading. Ever since I've started that, I've noticed a lot of tension has been squashed. The biggest success was our intimate life, though. Almost every time we slept together, my PTSD was being triggered, and when I finally told him about it, it was during the heat of an argument, so it all came out wrong. I basically passed a complex onto my SO where he was worried about it every time we did anything. He stopped instigating for a while because of it. This gave me some super mixed feelings, even to the point that I convinced myself he was cheating on me. This was what led me to my first appointment with my therapist. Communication was thrown out, but she also gave me pointers on healthy, open communication. One person speaking, and the one listening not needing to immediately jump to defense, but rather try to jump to an understanding of one another. Since then, our intimate life is basically as strong as it was during the honeymoon phase. It feels like I've been reborn since going to therapy. Story 7. ADHD and medication has made a huge impact on my relationships. I was diagnosed in college. Since my dad did not believe in mental health disorders, I was ashamed of struggling with basic things that everyone else seemed to do so naturally. Stuff like sitting still during meetings at the ripe age of 21, or to listen to and remember short instructions from 1 minute to the next. Even just processing was a nightmare. A baby in a pool in front of me flipped on a floaty boat, and I stood there letting the baby struggle for a good 5 seconds before a panicked mom next to him turned around and flipped him back, and I managed to process, oh, that baby was in trouble. I generally did okay in school, but teachers always had to give me an extra 5, 10, or 30 minutes on a test. even on exams that were easy to me. By college, I no longer received extra time and my grades started sinking quickly despite my best efforts. Taking meds felt like looking at everything with your first pair of glasses after years of foggy vision. I realized some people banked on my short-term memory to steal from me. People would borrow something mid-conversation, wallet, iPod, my homework, my books, and just never give it back. Or, like with the wallet, try to return a different item. Because I could never remember what was mine in detail and I was ashamed to admit it, I just got used to things going missing. It was a hell of a wake-up call when certain friends were surprised I actually asked for my stuff back, or when they handed me the wrong items and I corrected them. My family got angry multiple times when they said I had promised X, and I pointed out it was actually YZ. I began to paper trail everything. I still live by my list and schedules. I was still a little late to everything, but my work became so much better quality. I would remember what people said to me from one day ago, so I felt like I was actually getting to know people, like really know them, one day to the next. I started getting obsessed with people's stories, and I made some close friends for the first time, and after the initial shock, I even got to know my own family, as weird as that sounds. I made huge strides in my career, and my ADHD suddenly became a superpower. I could take random thought into creative solutions. My hyperactiveness became initiative and enthusiasm. My paper trail has covered my butt more times than I can count, and I've been known as one of the most reliable people in my circle, if you can forgive the 10 to 15 minutes late I arrive every time. Story 8. I believe that I have some or maybe a lot of narcissistic traits, never having been told by any of my numerous therapists. And I never realized it until I was with my now husband. I've come to learn through tons of self-reflection and awareness. I think it's due to my need for control because of an almost complete lack of boundaries as a child. I also have OCD tendencies and severe anxiety, and it's always manifested as severe irritability and anger/outrage at the tiniest of things. But I never in a million years thought that I was the problem until I'd been together with my husband for about a year, and we were expecting our second child. I've been working meticulously on myself for the past 3 years and have a long way to go, but I can now identify my triggers. And also I'm much less demanding and controlling, and I'm aware of the subconscious emotional manipulation I was using on my husband. He was able to express how much it's affected him, and it really sank in for me the degree of damage I was doing to my relationships with others, friendships and my children included. And I am so lucky I was able to see it to start healing, so that I didn't continue on that path and hurting those I love. Huge props to OP for constantly trying to improve themselves. Whether what they believe they have is narcissistic tendencies or not doesn't really matter. They just see ways that they've hurt people around them and are trying not to do it. So labels aside, OP, you're doing great work. This is the kind of work that I kind of hope everyone does. I know it's not, but when people are just unkind to other people, I do just hope they figure it out one day, that they realize they're not being the greatest. Because to get better in that sense, you do have to realize what you're doing wrong. Story 9. Not a very long one, but one that makes me feel like I'm going to be okay. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder a little bit after my 18th birthday. It was terrible for a while, but I was trying to get better. Failing most of the time, admittedly. But then at work, me and this guy had been getting closer and working together for over 6 months. We confirmed we had romantic feelings for each other and it was going great. Then I had an episode in front of him and was absolutely terrified. Later that night after the episode, he texted me, asking if I was okay, and how he wasn't upset, only worried about me. I explained to him what my disorder was and how it made things hard for me in relationships. He said he understood, and that wasn't going to scare him away. Later, I found out he actually read a lot online on how to help your loved ones with BPD, and how to make things easier for them. Now I try to get better every day, even if some days are hard. On the hard days, he's there for me, just like he is on the better days. I don't know what I would do without him. Story 10. I have a suspected dissociative personality disorder that stems from some very serious childhood trauma. I've gone through toxic relationships that went both ways. Me checking out and letting people treat me however they wanted, even as far as severe physical abuse to just using me for money and banging. 3 years ago, I met my now husband, and he called me out. When I dissociate, he somehow has figured out how to bring me out of it, which takes a lot of patience and kindness on his part. He made me see through my own BS and want to be better. So I started with medication, started thinking things through, and started truly facing the trauma that caused me to be this way and cope in a healthy way. It nearly broke us. 3 years later, and while that's not a lot of time, I haven't dissociated in a year. When someone upsets me, I can calmly talk about what it was and why it upset me, and I can get through it, instead of shutting myself down and functioning on autopilot where I'm honestly heartless. It took a lot of work, a lot of fights. Finally learning to cry again, finally digging to the bottom of it. I'm nowhere near done, but now I want to work it all out. I want to be better. It sucks sometimes, honestly, but if I need to rant, he'll listen. If I need a hug or a cuddle, he's right there, and I'm there for him too. I don't know if I'm a success story or if this is the beginning of a success, but I'm determined for the first time in my life to not let this personality disorder be an excuse for bad behavior. Story 11. Diagnosed ASPD by multiple mental health professionals, and I pretty much fit the mold of sociopath to a T. I say pretty much instead of completely because of the relationship I have with my fiancée. I met her almost 3 years ago, and immediately felt a whole bunch of weird emotions I'd never felt before as soon as I saw her, first time. I was 22 at the time, and I had never loved, cared about, or been emotionally invested in another person for the entirety of my life. I faked it when necessary, but I had pretty much given up on ever feeling love or compassion for another person. She changed all of that. She is the only human being on this planet that I care about. I would do absolutely anything for her. I treat her with the utmost respect and humanity. I don't manipulate her. I do not lie to her. I don't lead her along through the use of fear, intimidation, and/or psychological manipulation, but rather with my most genuine attempts at love and kindness. Sometimes I fall short. She's aware of my diagnosis, and it sometimes bothers her that I don't treat anyone else in my life the way I treat her. But I do, and always will, try my damn best to treat her like a queen. Because, hey, she is. We've been together for almost 2 years, and we are both extremely happy in our relationship. My current therapist is continuously blown away by the fact that there's one overwhelming exception to my otherwise textbook antisocial behavior. After growing up almost completely devoid of human emotion, empathy, or compassion, developing these feelings was initially quite scary. I wouldn't trade them for anything, though. Love is pretty cool. Story 12. I was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy, about 1.5 years ago. It was rough. I was scared, but everyone around me was scared too. Of me. The few people I'd actually been able to make bonds with were scared of me. Hell, my own parents were scared to even talk to me. My wife, though? She wasn't scared. She was a bit startled, of course, but she wasn't scared. I asked her if she was, and she told me that she's known me for so long. She always knew me and loved me the way I am, for who I am. She's the only person I've dated, after all. She said she knew I wouldn't change just 'cause a piece of paper from a doctor. I gotta say, a little kindness during tough times can even warm the heart of a sociopath. I think this is often overlooked with a lot of mental health diagnoses. Anyway, the fact that now that it has a label, the person is still the person. They've had this all along. If you liked them before, you're probably going to keep liking them, as long as the diagnosis doesn't make the person act differently. But I don't think it too often does. If a loved one you have, or a friend or whatever, gets diagnosed with something like this, they're not going to change. Don't worry. If anything, it'll help them be more genuine about how they feel, which is good. And if you really like them for who they are, then it'll be fine. Nothing to worry about. Story 13. I have PTSD, social anxiety, bipolar type 2, ADHD, mild OCD, chronic depression, and personality disorder NOS, not otherwise specified. Means I have a lot of this and that, but not all traits of one particular disorder. All diagnosed, and the majority, except personality disorder and social anxiety, since I was 12. Not medicated, as I've had too many instances where doctors would rather overdrug me to the point where I get sick, addicted, or lose literally all ability to experience emotions. I'm also married, second marriage. First marriage failed not due to my disabilities, but due to my ex's severe abuse. So my current husband got a very broken version of myself. My PTSD was through the roof bad, stemming from constant abuse for 25 years of my life, but he handled it, and still does, amazingly. While I don't have many episodes anymore, it had only been 18 months since I kicked my ex out when I met my husband, and he helped me through frequent flashbacks, panic, and anxiety attacks, and one episode where I did something menial/stupid and I freaked out that he wouldn't hit me. My ex apparently ingrained into my psyche that hitting was the appropriate response, and not hitting was the ultimate punishment. He took it all in stride, my tears and issues, and helped me see what a healthy relationship is like. We struggle sometimes, as all marriages do, and we're realizing he also has some undiagnosed mental issues. But it's my turn to help him through it, and find ways to cope. Perfectly imperfect marriage. But I know for a fact that he is my soulmate, and he deserves a trophy for putting up with my chaotic mess of a mind. Story 14. I live with borderline personality disorder, and it's been a strange ride for me so far. After suffering for basically my whole adolescence ignorantly, I finally got diagnosed 3.5 years ago. I battled in a circle with that information, got into 2 serious relationships in that time until quite recently, where I'm now single and only just starting therapy. My BPD has transformed how I think, both positively and negatively. On one hand, I am extremely extremely self-aware and introspective of my feelings, other people's feelings, and our surroundings, which basically means I've become more open-minded, empathetic, and sensitive to people around me. This has been good in my relationships because it's easy for me to listen to my partner's feelings and needs and act in a way that supports them, while allowing me to strengthen our emotional connections too. I think it's made me a more passionate/caring lover as well, as I am very susceptible to their body language/feelings and interactions with me. However, those traits are present in how I communicate with myself too. Feelings can be abnormally weak or strong. My energy/mood levels bounce up and down, and that self-awareness translates to self-criticism all the same. My exes have all said similar things. I'm hard to love. If I wasn't this way, then things would be easier. I thought I could do it, but it's just really hard. You're amazing when you're being yourself, etc. And I would be lying if I said it doesn't tear you up a bit. I almost always carry the weight of my experiences, good or bad, into every new step in life, not just relationships. It's great for learning more about myself and the world I'm in, but it can take its toll when faced with new relationships, and I often find myself simply being happier alone. I'm only 22 though, and I smile knowing I'm taking time to love me and to love those who already love me, before I love anyone else. Story 15. I am 26, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. To make a very long story short, some incredibly messed up stuff happened with my father when I was a child, and that probably spurred a lot of my fears about being abandoned/being alone forever. My diagnosis at 13 helped and also didn't. Many of my partners said I was too much, hard to love, had high expectations, and the winner, a manipulative female dog. I know when I did wrong things or when my disorder took me to dark places. My expectations of relationships as a teen were a bit high. I wanted to meet my soulmate immediately, but I also just wanted to be respected and loved for who I am and not what I can offer. I always thought affection was frisky in nature due to my past abuse and teenage relationships. This carried over to my current romantic relationship. I met my partner when we were in undergrad and he truly loves me. Sometimes it feels like more than I deserve, but he always knows how to listen. He's the first one who ever read about my diagnosis to better understand what I need. Even when we broke up in the beginning due to him needing to get himself together mentally and financially, he never fed into my fears, anger, or body dysmorphia. This man didn't date for the 2 years we were broken up. I didn't ask him to stay single. We got back together last year, now that we're both better off. Even better news? We're getting married. I'm so grateful he's taken the time to understand that I'm not going to manipulate him or shove him away, and that he doesn't see me as a statistic. I hope everyone with BPD gets to accomplish good things and meet great people, whether the relationships be platonic or romantic. Story 16. I was diagnosed with BPD about 7 years ago. I was 12. I have a weird form of BPD which can be called quiet. That means that most of the symptoms don't outwardly show, unlike the stereotypical BPD. I didn't hurt and yell at others, and if I did, it was rare. But I always hurt and yelled at myself. I absolutely hated myself and everything I was. I won't write all of how it affected me, or else this would be a very long comment. When I met my fiancé 5 years ago, I still had intense problems with the drug use, self-harm, impulsivity, occasional manipulation, a reckless but undeniable urge to connect to someone, and absorbing my personality into my significant others, essentially becoming their interests and what I thought they would like. I was diagnosed around the same time when I had started seeing a therapist, from a branch called Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, DBT. My therapist taught me a lot of skills on handling my disorder, and understanding that it influences my destructive behaviors. This was the jumpstart of my recovery. DBT saved my life. Without it, I definitely would have taken my own life. I only have recently rehabilitated myself into who I am today, with the love and help of my fiancé and his family. But before, I could be an absolute monster. My fiancé had realized that all of my pushback of moving in, as well as deceiving him even though I hadn't done wrong, was a sad symptom of my disorder. We took the time to talk it out because truthful, honest communication is key. He got his mom involved and they both gave me the biggest hug and said, "You're our family now. We won't leave. We aren't giving up on you and you will take the steps to get better." I had never heard that from anyone before, and it set me in shock. I knew from then that I needed to help myself for the sake of having a better life and a future with someone that I love. I cried a lot. I let out all of the emotions I hid for so long. Heck, I'm even crying now typing this out. But even with some bumps and bruises, him and I are on a much better path. I moved in with him. I haven't lied to him in months. I've been open about what upsets me so we can either fix it, or if it isn't as bad as it seems, he'll cool me off and wait for me to settle. I've never felt a purer love than this, and even though I know I could have rehabilitated on my own, I know now that saying, "I'm hurt and I need help," is okay. I still have problems sometimes, but now I know that I'm not alone anymore. I have someone willing to understand my disorder but also hold me accountable for my actions. I love him and his family unconditionally, and I know they love me too. I don't know if this point is necessary at all, but I do want to point out, this kind of support and love does not have to come from a romantic partner. Plenty of people who have similar mental disorders or mental health issues find this support system through friends and family. I just want to mention this because I've known some cases where people start beating themselves up because they feel like getting a partner is the path to recovery and they can't because they're still recovering. It's a whole thing. So if you're at the point where you're ready for it in life, a romantic partner can absolutely help with these things. And if you're not, that same level of support and love can come from other places too, so don't worry. There are always paths forward. Story 17. I suffer from panic disorder really bad. I've had my condition my entire life, but for some reason when I was a teenager and early 20s, it went into remission, after lots of therapy and tests. When I was around 30, it started to flare back up again without me noticing. My wife, current and present, started to notice a change in my personality. I had become very introverted and would have emotional episodes that seemed unwarranted and very sudden. She eventually suggested I go see a doctor, and that's when I finally got properly diagnosed with panic disorder. Here are a few things that we've learned in our journey through this. 1. It's important that you share your feelings with your SO, doctor, close friend/family, etc., especially during any episodes. The sooner you realize that an episode is starting, the sooner you can work on your coping mechanisms. 2. Honesty. Don't beat around the bush when you need something. There are times when I become frozen in fear doing random things and just break down crying. I used Google Assistant to call my wife and to let her know I'm stuck somewhere. 3. Seek many forms of help. Not everyone will respond to the same treatments. I found ways to handle certain types of episodes that bubble up. Lastly, leave your shame and pride at the door. It's not worth it. I'm a 36-year-old male that breaks down violently crying, hides in a corner scared for my life, or just gets so angry at everything that I seem like a complete case. None of it bothers me anymore, simply because now I know there is no shame in my condition. Story 18. I'm not sure if I count as a success story, so you decide. I come from a background of childhood abuse, including intimate and emotional. My mother would drive me to attempts on my own life on a regular basis, and all my siblings abandoned me. I've been in counseling in my teens where they diagnosed me with clinical anxiety/depression. As soon as I turned 18, I just up and left for America, where I now live with my husband. I finally addressed my issues properly, and I can identify destructive behaviors such as intrusive thoughts, why don't you go and end your life, for example, and I can snap out of it faster than before. I live stress-free as much as possible, so I avoid anything that gives me stress or anxiety. This is stuff like toxic relationships and certain types of people. I'm working right now and saving up to go to university, and I finally have life goals. I finally have something to live for, and I can finally breathe. I look back to the way I used to live, constant anxiety and fear, and wonder how I survived for so long, but I'm glad I did. Story 19. Borderline personality disorder. Recently married. Been together for 8 years. Having a personality disorder. I have a few comorbidities that all essentially come from childhood trauma. Therapy has been the most important thing, specifically finding the kind of therapy that works for you. I found DBT, distress tolerance, and daily mindfulness practice to be key for me. I'm basically learning what I didn't learn as a child, to regulate my emotions and form healthy relationships. This also includes coming to terms with complex trauma and abuse and the lasting effects it's had. Being in a happy relationship. Obviously, all that generally apply in making a relationship work. Mutual respect, affection, honesty, communication, and shared values. Specific to having BPD, having a partner that is validating and emotionally intelligent. Personally recognizing my own negative behaviors and working on them. We act very much as a team, and that includes my recovery and treatment. We have an action plan for moments of high distress where I can rate my levels of distress from 1 to 10, and we have a tool/skill/action plan for that. For example, a grounding exercise, intense physical exercise, creating a safe environment, etc. If you have BPD, you can feel things very intensely, but that swings both ways, and means you can also be an incredibly empathetic and a loving person. Find a treatment plan that works for you, strap in for the long haul, and you have as much chance of finding a happy relationship as anyone else. And there you have it. A good story to end things on, I think, because OP sums things up pretty well. Understanding your condition and knowing how to work with it is definitely key to managing it. It sounds like OP has worked really hard to find ways that work for them, and it's going great. And these things might take a while to find, so if you're struggling with this, don't be stressed about finding it as soon as possible. Just keep working, and with honest work, it will come. To anyone listening with any personality disorders or anything of that sort, I really do wish you the best of luck. But more than luck, I also hope that you just work as hard as you can, because these things are tough and they require work. But with work, you don't need so much luck, I think. And it's always nicer to have things in control rather than out of your control, isn't it? And for anyone listening who has a partner or a loved one with a personality disorder, just show them all the patience and love you can. Because as I've said before in this video, a diagnosis or a label doesn't change who they are. And if you love them, you love them. Anyway, that's all for now. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.